Next question.
Thank you. Similar to Steve's comment, I just wanted to ask Dr. Fernandes a quick question. I was attracted to this mainly to hear your positions as described as reasonable or scientifically supported. I'll leave the reason and logic aspects of the philosophers present. I'm a psychologist. Of the scientific evidence you cited, 100% of it with which I'm familiar, which is not all of it, but 100% of it with which I am familiar, was either outdated, unrepresentative of the field, or completely inverted. And the example I would give was when you were addressing the research by Penfield and Rasmussen and Sperry and other psychophysiologists, where electrodes were implanted in brains and thoughts occurred, memories occurred, movements occurred. You then attributed that as support for a theistic position because the metaphysical realm of decision making was not addressed. That is not what they were researching. None of those researchers you cited concluded that this was evidence for anything metaphysical. It was exactly the opposite, 180 degrees, that things that appear metaphysical to us, that appear non-physical in a realm of metaphysics or paranormal or paranatural called consciousness or mind. This was evidence against that because things that appear to us to be paranatural turn out to be entirely physical. So that's another area along Steve's line. I would just ask for your response in general in terms of the quality of the scientific data and the accuracy with which you're quoting it. But on that specific one, I guarantee you all that work and the replications thereof reached exactly the opposite conclusion of the point you used in your argument.
And I would again say now, what I've read of that particular, those particular experiments, it did seem to me that there were surprises. They did not get what exactly it was that they were looking for. At the same time, you know, there are plenty of scientists who are Christians out there, and if you want someone more versed in it, go and get them. And I would like to make one suggestion, though. I would thought that this particular question and answer period would be limited to like a 1-minute question and a 2-minute response by both, no matter who it's related to, because otherwise, because this room is filled with friends of Jeff Lowder, it's actually going to work against him. But it might seem like I'm on the spot, but basically I'm getting 3 minutes to respond. He only gets 30 seconds. So what if we go with 2 minutes?
Well,
2 minutes?
we can go with 2 and 2 then. It's not, as long as the crucial thing is that we wrap this thing up in about 30 minutes from now. Jeff, do you have any?
Crucial thing is I get on my plane
Right.
and get out of town.
Do anything? All right. We've got a question at the back of the room here.
Thank you. Just since all the other questions were prefaced by a 30-second comment, I'd like to make a comment. As a Christian theist who attended the entire conference, I would like to thank you who put this on, the work that you did. I thought the conference went very well. I thought there were a lot of stimulating papers, and I've got a lot to think about and consider when I go back to Charlotte, so I want to express my thanks. My question is to Mr. Lowder. I thought I heard you concur with Dr. Fernandez's commitment to the dictum or the law that everything that begins to exist has a cause of its existence. But then later, I thought I heard you say that time and space began to exist but did not need a cause. And if you said those, how would you resolve that contradiction?
Yes, actually that's not quite what I said, and this is a very subtle distinction, so this is probably a good thing for me to try and explain again what my position is. What I said is that anything that begins to exist in space and time has a cause. William Lane Craig, for example, in his debates, I think I once heard him talk about the absurdity of believing that you could sit in your living room watching TV and a tiger could just pop into existence in your living room out of nothing. That would be an example of an event in space and time, and I agree that that would be absurd to say that something like that could happen. What I'm saying is there's a difference between that kind of an event and the origin of space and time itself. All of our experiences, our metaphysical intuitions, all of the support that Craig, Fernandes, and other theists have brought in support of their causal principle, I think are just completely irrelevant to the very origin of space and time, and therefore I see no reason at all to believe that the beginning of the universe, if the Big Bang Theory is true, needs a cause.
And I would basically respond, and he doesn't like the Thomistic argument from dependency. If all the things in nature need a cause, then when you collect them all together, you get one big group of dependent things that still need a cause for their continuing existence. So I think that the law of causality within space and time argues, or at least favors very strongly, the theistic position that therefore the whole collection of these dependent things needs a cause.
All right, we have a question over here then.
Yes, I want to mention a point of agreement with Dr. Fernandes, and that's that we both agree on the laws of logic. So I just want to check with two premises of your syllogism if we can agree on the conclusion. Because in talking about the problems of the human concept of infinity, you said infinity doesn't exist except as a concept in the human mind. Then you said God is infinite. Can we then conclude that therefore God doesn't exist except as a concept within the human mind?
No, that's a good question. It's a very good question. The only problem is, sir, and I don't mean it in any bad way, but you're misreading me. I said that an actual infinite set cannot exist outside of a mind. So if there's an actual infinite set of things that can exist in a mind, guess what kind of mind it would be? It would be an actually infinite mind. And so basically what I'm arguing is that God knows an actually infinite number of things. Now, you can't get there through successive addition, so that means he must know them innately in one eternal glance. Now, this is Thomism, Thomas Aquinas and that type of thing, and you may reject it, but I'm not saying an actual infinite set can exist in a human finite mind. I'm saying it can exist in a mind, but when we look at what kind of mind it's got to be an infinite mind. So I don't see a real glaring problem there. Now, if you explain me how an infinite mind can know an infinite number of things, I'd say go ask the infinite mind.
I haven't really talked about the possibility of an actual infinite because for purposes of this debate, it's irrelevant to my position because I accept the fact of Big Bang Theory. So there would be no point in me defending the possibility of an actual infinite because I don't believe that the universe is infinitely old. That's all I have to say.
We have another question toward the back of the room here. All right.
My question is for Jay. It seemed that throughout the debate, especially the opening remarks, you made a number of observations. To name a few, tragedies occurring, biological role of pain and pleasure, as well as religious confusion. I believe that you preceded these observations by saying that given these particular occurrences and observations, which I named, the existence of God or theism seems rather unreasonable or improbable. If that's correct, my question is this: where is it that you're getting your from that leads you to believe that theism or God's existence would be improbable given these things? That is, how are you determining this probability?
I'd have to, we'd have to really address your question, I'd have to talk about a specific argument. But in general, I thought I answered this in my speech. I tried to explain why, given some fact about our world, that would be surprising. It would not be what we would expect given theism. Several of my arguments, you'll notice, had to do with things that we would, that I say are improbable on theism, because they are facts that would only be true if God had a morally sufficient reason for allowing them. And in my speech, I tried to argue that the odds that there were such a moral reason is pretty unlikely. I tried to argue that it was more likely on naturalism than on theism. Technically, what I'm using is epistemic conditional antecedent probability. But I mean, I don't know if that answers your question. It's hard to talk in generalities. We'd have to go into a specific argument.
I would say that basically, just in response to that, that the theist doesn't have to argue that this is the greatest possible world, but he would have to argue this is the greatest possible way to achieve the greatest possible world, i.e. what the Bible calls heaven, and that God often uses evil and human suffering to draw people to himself. Now, God's ways and thoughts are far above our understanding. Even the scriptures state that. So at best, atheistic arguments show that limited minds cannot fully understand why God allows so much evil, but that's only expected if you believe in the existence of an infinite God, and only God knows the right amount of evil and human suffering. I mean, where do you draw the line? So we draw the line all the way back so that only one guy on earth doesn't get saved. Well, then the atheist would still scream, well, that's unfair. That's too much suffering because he's the only one that's not going to heaven. So where do you draw the line? I believe God knows where to draw the line, and he brings about the greatest good which I believe is the maximum amount of people in heaven fellowshipping with him for all eternity.